The Black Maid helped a lost teen escape a violent corridor, and the Mafia boss followed her in rare silence. Maya Simmons had been cleaning the grand halls of the Rossi estate for almost 3 months now. It wasn't a glamorous job, but it paid the bills. A woman of few words, Maya's existence in the mansion had always been quiet. She moved through the opulent rooms like a shadow, invisible to the powerful men and women who roamed its marble floors. But today was different. Today, something was off. She'd been asked to escort a teenager named Danny down a long corridor that led to a section of the mansion few dared to enter. The moment she stepped into that hallway, she felt the tension. Danny, a lost soul, seemed out of place in this lavish house, his eyes wide with fear. The corridor was dimly lit, and the air felt thick with an uneasy silence. As they walked, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. It wasn't until they reached a narrow passage at the end that she realized why. The doors creaked open to reveal a group of men, rough around the edges, whose glares seemed to pierce through her. They noticed Maya and Danny immediately. The conversation that followed was full of taunts and sneers, the kind of verbal abuse that Maya had become accustomed to. But this time, something felt different. Danny looked at Maya, his face pale, as though he knew they were in trouble. He stepped back, and Maya instinctively put herself between him and the men. Her mind raced. She wasn't supposed to be here, not in this part of the mansion. She wasn't supposed to stand up to these people. But something in her told her that today would be different. Without warning, a heavy footfall echoed from behind. Maya turned just in time to see Dominic Rossi, the Mafia boss himself, stepping into the hallway, his eyes locked on the scene before him. The room fell silent as his gaze swept over the men and then settled on Maya. For a brief moment, the world stood still. Maya's heart pounded in her chest. She didn't know what would happen next. Dominic's presence was overwhelming, but what followed shocked her to the core. In a rare silence, he didn't yell, didn't order anyone around. He just stood there, watching. And then, with a calm that almost seemed out of place, he raised his hand and dismissed the men with a single motion. They left without a word, as if the Mafia boss's mere presence was enough to command obedience. Maya's breath caught in her throat. She turned to Danny, who was staring up at Dominic with wide eyes. For the first time in a long while, Maya felt something other than fear. She didn't know what it was, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted in that moment. For the first time in her life, someone had stood up for her. Not with words, but with silence. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen, my heart racing in my chest, still processing what had just happened. Dominic Rossi, the Mafia boss, had acted as though he were just another man in a suit, but his presence was unlike anything I had ever felt. It was as if the air itself held its breath the moment he entered that hallway. The silence between him and the men who had been mocking us was thick, like the calm before a storm. I turned slowly to look at Danny, whose wide eyes seemed to say everything I couldn't put into words. For a split second, we were both lost in the weight of what had just unfolded. Then, without a word, Dominic moved toward us. I wasn't sure what to expect. Was he going to throw us out? Was he going to tell us to go back to our duties and forget this whole mess? But instead, he looked down at Danny, his gaze softening just a fraction. For a moment, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes, a strange mix of curiosity and something else I couldn't quite place. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice low, but surprisingly gentle. It wasn't the voice of a man who controlled empires or could destroy lives with a single word. It was the voice of someone asking, not as a boss, but as a man who wanted to know the truth. I nodded slowly, not sure if I could trust my own voice. I didn't know how to answer. How could I explain what I was feeling? How could I explain that, for the first time since I had entered this mansion, I didn't feel invisible? The weight of the moment hung heavy in the air, but somehow, despite everything, I felt a strange sense of relief. I had expected Dominic to be cold, to demand answers, to make us disappear. But instead, he just stood there, waiting for a response. Danny, still trembling beside me, finally managed to speak. I think we're okay now." His voice was barely a whisper, but it carried a weight of gratitude I couldn't ignore. Dominic's eyes flicked between the two of us, as if processing the situation, before he gave a single nod, dismissing us with the same calm authority he had used moments before. "You're free to go," he said. "Stay out of trouble." His words weren't harsh, but there was a command in them, one that made it clear he expected us to heed his advice. Without another word, he turned and walked away, disappearing down the corridor as if nothing had happened. I couldn't move at first. My legs felt like they were made of stone, and for a brief moment, I thought I might collapse right there. But then, I heard Danny's voice again, shaky but filled with awe. Did he just let us go? I looked at him, unsure of what to say. It didn't seem real. In all the years I'd worked here, I had never seen Dominic act this way. He was a man known for his power, his ruthlessness, and yet in that moment, he had been something else. He had been kind. It wasn't something I could easily wrap my mind around, but it was there. It was undeniable. Slowly, I turned and led Danny back down the hallway, my steps lighter than they had been when we entered. We didn't speak much as we walked, both of us still processing the events that had just unfolded. It felt surreal, like a dream I couldn't quite shake off. As we reached the main staircase, I looked back down the hallway, half expecting to see Dominic watching us. But he was gone, leaving behind nothing but the silence that had once felt so oppressive, now strangely comforting. The weight of what had just happened hung in the air, but for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like a burden. I didn't know what this meant for me, for Danny, or even for Dominic. But I did know. One thing, something had shifted in that moment, and I couldn't help but wonder what would come next. I walked down the long hallway, still in a daze. The mansion around me, once so overwhelming, now felt different. The air seemed lighter, the usual tension replaced by something unspoken. Danny walked beside me, his steps hesitant but filled with gratitude. He kept glancing over at me, as if he couldn't believe what had just happened. I couldn't blame him. I could hardly believe it myself. Dominic Rossi, the Mafia boss, had never shown this side of himself before. Sure, he was known for his cold demeanor, his control over everything and everyone in his world. But today, something had shifted. I couldn't explain it, but I knew it. Maybe it was because of the way he had looked at me, not as the invisible Maid, but as someone worthy of his attention, even if just for a brief moment. As we reached the main floor, I turned to Danny. "Are you okay?" I asked. He nodded, but I could tell he was still in shock. "I don't know what just happened," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. That was the Mafia boss, wasn't it? He just let us go." I nodded. "Yeah, he did." My own voice sounded distant, as if I wasn't entirely present in that moment. I wasn't sure how to process everything. It was as if the world had tilted on its axis, and I had no idea where I stood anymore. Danny looked at me. "I don't know what to say," he said, his voice full of emotion. "But, thank you. You saved me back there." I smiled at him, but it was a small, sad smile. "I didn't do anything," I said softly. "He was the one who let us go." But deep down, I knew I had done something. I had stepped up when it mattered. I had put myself in the line of fire, even though I was terrified. And somehow, in that moment, it had made all the difference. As we walked through the mansion, the usual sounds of the staff hustling around, the clinking of dishes and footsteps echoing on the marble floors, seemed muted. The chaos and noise that once filled the air felt like it was far away, like I was in a completely different world. I kept my head down as we passed the staff quarters, trying to stay out of sight. I didn't want to draw attention to myself. Not yet, anyway. The reality of what had just happened was still sinking in. I had never been in a position like this before. The Mafia boss had seen me. He had heard me. And for some reason, he had chosen not to punish me, like I had feared so many times before. I had always lived under the unspoken rule that people like me didn't matter to people like him. We were invisible, expendable, and meant to be forgotten. But today, Dominic Rossi had treated me differently. I didn't know what that meant, or what would come of it, but I knew one thing. I couldn't go back to the way things were before. I couldn't just continue being a shadow in the background, invisible to the world. Not after today. Not after he had shown me that there was more to life than being ignored. As we reached the back door, I turned to Danny one last time. "Are you sure you're okay?" I asked. He nodded again, his eyes still wide with disbelief. "Yeah, I think I am," he said. "I just don't get it. Why did he do that?" I shook my head. "I don't know. But whatever the reason, we need to be careful. We can't forget what happened today." I opened the door and stepped out into the cool evening air, the weight of everything still pressing down on me. Danny followed me, and together, we walked away from the mansion. The world outside felt so much bigger than the one we had left behind. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let this moment fade away. I couldn't. What had happened today had changed everything. And as I looked up at the darkening sky, I couldn't help but wonder, what was next? I hadn't expected to feel this way. After everything that had happened at the mansion, I thought I'd just go back to my life. Quiet, invisible, and routine. But it wasn't the same. Not anymore. Every step I took seemed heavier than before, and my mind kept replaying that moment in the hallway, when Dominic Rossi stood there, silent, yet somehow more present than I had ever imagined him to be. I had seen him around the mansion, of course, but he had always been a figure in the background, someone to be avoided, never acknowledged. But that day, today, was different. I didn't know what it meant, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed, both in him and in me. I had always lived under the rule of invisibility. People like me were meant to be forgotten. We cleaned, we worked, and we stayed out of sight. But for the first time, someone had seen me. Really seen me. And that changed everything. It was a week after that day before I found myself back at the mansion, cleaning the same halls, passing the same rooms, and doing the same tasks. But now, it felt different. It wasn't just the mansion that had changed, it was me. I was still just the maid, but now there was something in the air, a shift in how I walked through those halls. People still ignored me, of course, but it was as if the space I occupied had changed. I wasn't sure if anyone else had noticed it, but I had. I couldn't help it. My thoughts kept drifting back to Dominic. I wondered what had really been going through his mind that day. Why had he done what he did? He didn't know me anything. He didn't know Danny anything. And yet, he had done something I couldn't quite understand. I hadn't seen him since that day in the corridor, and though I tried not to, I couldn't stop thinking about him. It was as if his presence had burned itself into my memory, and no matter how much I tried to forget, it kept coming back. I had to admit to myself that I was curious about him, curious about why he acted the way he did. What was it that made him different from all the others who walked those halls with their power, their money, and their disregard for people like me? As the days passed, my curiosity only grew. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to him, something I wasn't seeing. But how could I possibly learn more? I was just a maid, a nobody in the grand scheme of things. I didn't belong in his world, and I certainly didn't belong in his thoughts. Still, I couldn't ignore the fact that I had been seen by him, and that fact kept me awake at night, questioning everything I had ever known about myself. A few days later, as I was cleaning the grand dining hall, I heard footsteps approaching. I turned instinctively, my heart skipping a beat when I saw Dominic walking down the hallway, his usual entourage of bodyguards at his back. He looked straight ahead, not acknowledging me as he passed. But then, something unexpected happened. He stopped, just for a moment. His eyes flicked over to me, and there was something in his gaze, something I couldn't quite place. It wasn't the cold, calculating stare I had come to expect. It was softer, more human, and for a brief second, I thought I saw a flicker of recognition in his eyes. Before I could say anything, he turned away and continued walking, his footsteps echoing down the hall. My breath caught in my throat, and I felt an unexpected rush of emotion. Was it possible that he had remembered me? That he had thought of me? Or was I simply imagining things? Either way, I knew that moment, brief as it was, had changed something inside me. It wasn't just about the way he looked at me. It was the fact that he had stopped. And in that moment, I realized something. I had always been afraid of being seen. Afraid of what it might mean. But maybe, just maybe, being seen wasn't the curse I had always believed it to be. Maybe it was the key to something more, something greater. As I returned to my work, my thoughts raced. What did this all mean? Why did Dominic Rossi, of all people, look at me like that? Was there something more to this connection than I understood? I didn't know the answers. But I knew one thing. I couldn't go back to being the invisible maid I once was. Not anymore. The world had shifted, and so had I. I couldn't focus. Every task, every movement seemed to be happening on autopilot. It had been weeks since that moment in the hallway, and I still couldn't shake the feeling of Dominic's eyes on me. I tried to convince myself that it was nothing, that it was just a fleeting look, a moment of curiosity from someone who had nothing better to do. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. And the more I thought about it, the more I couldn't ignore the strange pull I felt towards him. I had always kept my distance from the powerful, from the people who ruled the world around me. They were untouchable, unreachable. But now, Dominic Rossi, the very embodiment of power, had acknowledged me. I was still just the maid. Nothing had changed in that sense. But something inside me had shifted. And for the first time, I felt like I mattered. Days passed, and I tried to go about my work with the same quiet determination as always. But it wasn't the same anymore. There was a weight in the air, a tension I couldn't explain. It wasn't just the mansion that felt different, it was me. The other staff members went about their business as usual, oblivious to the subtle changes in me. They didn't see the way I walked through the halls, more aware of the space I occupied, of the way the world around me seemed to shift when I was near it. I couldn't help but wonder if anyone else felt it. That strange connection that had formed between me and Dominic. It was unspoken, but it was there. One evening, as I was polishing the grand chandelier in the dining hall, I heard the soft creak of footsteps behind me. I didn't turn immediately. I wasn't sure if it was one of the staff or someone else. But then I felt it. A presence, an unmistakable aura that made the air feel charged. I knew without looking that it was Dominic. He didn't say anything at first. His footsteps stopped a few feet away from me, and I could feel his gaze on my back, as if he were studying me. "You've been busy," his voice broke the silence, calm and steady, like the sound of a distant storm. I turned slowly to face him, unsure of what to say. "Just keeping up with the work," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "I see," he said, his eyes locking onto mine in a way that made my heart skip a beat. "You've done well." The words were simple, but the weight behind them was enough to make me pause. He wasn't the type of man to give compliments easily, and hearing one from him, even if it was just for doing my job, felt different. "Thank you," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. But inside, I could feel something stir. "You've been working here for a while now," Dominic continued, his voice still low. "Do you like it?" It was such a simple question, but the way he asked it, with genuine curiosity, made me hesitate. What was he getting at? "I suppose," I said, my thoughts racing. "It's a job." His gaze never wavered, and I couldn't help but wonder what he was thinking. "You don't have to stay here forever, you know," he said, almost casually, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "There are other opportunities." I blinked, unsure of how to respond. Was he offering me a way out? Was he suggesting that I leave the mansion, that I move on to something else? Or was it something else entirely? "I don't know what you mean," I said carefully, trying to keep my voice steady. Dominic tilted his head slightly, as if considering his next words. "I've been watching you, Maya," he said quietly, his gaze never leaving mine. The words hit me like a punch to the gut, but I didn't let it show. "And I think you're capable of much more than this." The air between us seemed to thicken, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. Why was he saying this? Why was he telling me this? It wasn't like him to show interest in anyone outside of his usual circle of people. And yet, here he was, talking to me, acknowledging me in a way I never thought possible. I felt my heart race, my pulse quicken. I started to speak, but the words caught in my throat. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to process what was happening. Dominic took a step closer, his presence overwhelming. "You don't have to answer me now," he said, his voice softer, almost reassuring. "Just think about it. You have the potential to do more, to be more. Don't waste it." And with that, he turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing in the grand hall. I stood there for a long time, my mind racing. What had just happened? What had he meant by all of it? My thoughts were a whirlwind, and I couldn't make sense of any of it. I was still the maid, the same invisible woman I had always been. But Dominic's words hung in the air, a constant reminder that maybe, just maybe, I was meant for something more. I spent the next few days walking through the halls of the mansion, each step heavier than the last. Dominic's words echoed in my mind, over and over. "You have the potential to do more, to be more. Don't waste it." I couldn't shake them. What did it mean? What was he really trying to say? I had spent my whole life accepting my place, working as a maid, invisible, unnoticed. It was what I was used to, what I had come to expect from the world. But Dominic's words, they planted a seed of doubt. Maybe I wasn't meant to stay in the shadows forever. Maybe I could step out into the light. But how? I wasn't someone who took risks. I was the quiet one, the one who kept her head down and did the work without causing a stir. So why was Dominic suddenly making me question everything? Why had he singled me out? I had seen how he treated others, how he ruled the mansion with an iron fist. There was no room for weakness or hesitation in his world. And yet, when it came to me, he had acted differently. He had seen something in me, something I wasn't sure I even saw in myself. It scared me, but it also made me wonder if I was capable of more. I had never asked for much in life. All I wanted was to survive, to make it through each day without drawing attention. But now, it felt like the world was asking me to do more than that. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about living. And the idea terrified me. I had always been afraid of what it would mean to stand out, to be noticed. But with Dominic's words haunting me, I couldn't ignore the growing desire to take that step, to do something more with my life. But I had no idea how. I was still the same woman I had been a few days ago, walking the same halls, doing the same work. Nothing had changed in the grand scheme of things. Yet, everything felt different. I couldn't stop thinking about the moment when Dominic had looked at me with those eyes. The soft, almost thoughtful look he had given me. It wasn't the look of a man used to controlling everything around him. It was something else. A flicker of humanity, of understanding. I didn't know what to make of it. The next morning, as I was cleaning the main parlor, I heard footsteps approaching. I didn't need to look up to know who it was. It was Dominic again. This time, I was ready for him. I had been expecting it, somehow. He was always moving around the mansion, always present in some way, even when he wasn't directly in sight. He had this way of commanding attention without saying a word. And as he walked into the room, I found myself standing a little straighter, as if his presence had a physical effect on me. "Maya," he said, his voice steady and calm, like it always was. I turned to face him, my heart racing slightly. "Yes, sir?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. "I've been thinking," he began, his gaze never leaving mine, "about what I said the other day." I nodded, though I wasn't sure what to say. "I appreciate your offer," I said, my voice quieter than I intended. "But I don't know what you mean. I'm just here to do my job." Dominic's eyes softened slightly, as though he could see right through me. "You can keep doing your job, Maya," he said, his tone reassuring. "But you should know that you have a choice. You can do more than this. I can help you if you want." I stood there, unable to speak, as the weight of his words settled in. Did he really mean it? Was he offering me a way out? A way to escape the life I had always known? I couldn't believe it, but a part of me wanted to believe him. "I don't know if I can do that," I said quietly, my mind spinning. "I'm not sure I'm the kind of person you think I am." Dominic took a step closer, his eyes fixed on me with an intensity one hadn't expected. "You don't have to be anyone else, Maya," he said. "You just have to take the first step. The rest will come." His words, so simple, yet so powerful, struck a chord within me. I felt something inside me shift, like the ground beneath my feet was suddenly less steady, but in a way that made me feel alive. I had spent so long hiding from the world, from the people around me. But now, standing in front of Dominic, I realized that maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop hiding. Maybe it was time to take a chance on something more. "I'll think about it," I said, my voice steady now. Dominic nodded, as if he had expected this answer. "Take your time," he said. "But just know, the opportunity is there if you want it." And with that, he turned and left the room, leaving me standing there, alone, but no longer feeling quite so invisible. I wasn't sure what would happen next, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let this moment pass by without considering what it could mean for me. For the first time in my life, I had a choice, and I wasn't going to waste it. I spent the next few days in a haze, caught between the world I had always known and the possibility of something more. Dominic's words kept echoing in my mind, pulling at me, making me question everything I had believed about myself. It was strange, this new feeling that had settled inside me. For the first time, I was considering a life outside the confines of this mansion, outside the limits I had set for myself. But how could I take that step? Could I really leave the only life I had ever known, the only job that had kept me afloat? I had been invisible for so long, a silent observer in the shadows. Could I really step into the light? As I walked through the mansion, I tried to focus on my work, to push these thoughts aside. I cleaned the same marble floors, dusted the same fine furniture, and served the same meals. Each task as mundane as the last. But nothing felt the same anymore. The mansion, which had once been a place of security, now felt like a cage, its walls closing in on me. And then there was Dominic. He was always there, in the background, his presence a constant reminder of the decision I was avoiding. I had seen him a few times since our conversation, but he hadn't spoken to me again. It was as if he was waiting for me to make a choice, to take the first step. I was terrified. Terrified of what it would mean to break away from the life I had built here. Terrified of what would happen if I failed. But I couldn't stop thinking about the possibility of more. One evening, as I was cleaning the grand hallway, I saw Dominic standing at the end of the corridor, just outside the study. He was staring out the window, his back to me. It was a rare moment of quiet, a moment when I could almost pretend he was just another man, just another person who passed through the halls of the mansion. But as I walked closer, I felt the familiar pull, the weight of his presence, like an invisible force drawing me in. I stopped just a few feet away from him, my heart racing. He didn't turn around, but his voice broke the silence. "Maya," he said, his tone steady but not cold. "I've been waiting for you." I didn't know what to say. My mouth went dry, and I couldn't bring myself to speak. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. He was waiting for me? Waiting for me to do what? "You've been thinking about it, haven't you?" Dominic asked, his voice softer now. "About what I said." I nodded slowly, my heart beating faster. "I don't know what to do," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "I've always just done my job. I've never thought about anything else." He turned to face me, his gaze locking with mine. "You've been given an opportunity, Maya," he said quietly. "An opportunity to do more than this. But it's up to you whether you take it or not." I swallowed hard, my mind racing. Was he offering me a way out? A chance to escape the life I had known for so long? The thought terrified me, but at the same time, it filled me with a strange sense of possibility. I had spent so many years hiding in plain sight, doing the work, staying invisible. Could I really step into something more? "What do I do?" I asked, the words slipping out before I could stop them. Dominic smiled slightly, a rare, almost sad smile. "You don't have to decide right now," he said, his voice gentle. "But I think you already know what you want. You just have to be brave enough to take that first step." His words hit me like a wave, washing over me, leaving me both afraid and hopeful at the same time. I had always been afraid of change, of taking risks. But now, standing here with Dominic, I realized that the risk might be worth it. Maybe this was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment I had been too afraid to see. "I'll think about it," I said, my voice stronger now. "But I don't know if I'm ready." Dominic nodded, his expression unreadable. "Take your time," he said. "But know that the choice is yours. No one else can make it for you." And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, alone, with 1,000 thoughts swirling in my mind. I didn't know what would come next. I didn't know if I was ready for what lay ahead. But for the first time in my life, I felt like I had a choice. A real choice. And as I stood there, the weight of the decision heavy on my shoulders, I couldn't help but wonder what would happen if I took that first step. I woke up the next morning feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time, uncertainty. It was as if the world had shifted overnight, and now I was standing on the edge of something unknown. Dominic's words echoed in my mind, each one ringing louder than the last. "You have a choice." It was simple, yet profound. A choice. I had spent my life doing what was expected of me, keeping my head down, staying invisible. But now, I had the opportunity to choose something different. Something more. But what did that even mean? As I stood in front of the mirror, getting ready for another day of work, I couldn't help but wonder what life would be like if I took Dominic's offer. Would I be happy? Would I finally feel like I was living, not just surviving? Or would I regret it, realizing too late that stepping out of my comfort zone was a mistake? I didn't have the answers. All I knew was that I couldn't keep living the way I had. I had spent so many years just going through the motions, doing what was expected, never questioning it. But now, everything felt different. I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling in my chest, the one that told me I was capable of more. As I walked down the hallway, past the grand staircases and crystal chandeliers, I noticed the way the mansion felt. It was the same, but not. It felt like a place I didn't quite belong anymore. The walls seemed to close in around me, suffocating me with their weight. The same routine, the same tasks, the same faces. But none of it felt right. It wasn't my life anymore. It was just a role I had played for far too long. I entered the kitchen, where the staff was preparing for another busy day. Mrs. Chun, the head housekeeper, was giving orders as usual. She barely glanced at me as I walked in, her sharp eyes already scanning the room for any sign of mistake. I tried to focus on my work, to keep my mind occupied, but it was impossible. My thoughts kept drifting back to Dominic, to his offer, to the choice I had to make. I had never been good at making choices. I had always followed the path laid out for me, never questioning it. But now, it felt like I was standing at a crossroads, with two paths stretching out before me. One was the life I had always known, safe, predictable, and invisible. The other was unknown, full of potential, but also full of risks. I didn't know what to do. As the day passed, the weight of my decision grew heavier. I couldn't stop thinking about what Dominic had said, about the way he had looked at me. He had seen something in me, something I had never seen in myself. And now, I couldn't ignore it. I had to make a choice. I couldn't keep living in the shadows. That evening, as the mansion grew quiet and the staff finished their duties, I found myself standing in front of the grand staircase. I had no idea what I was doing, but I knew one thing. I couldn't stay in this place any longer. I had to make a change. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of purpose. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew that I had to take that first step. I couldn't keep living in fear, in the comfort of what I knew. It was time to embrace the unknown. I walked to the kitchen, my mind made up. Mrs. Chen looked up as I entered, her usual stern expression softening slightly. "Maya," she said, her voice less sharp than usual. "You look different today." I didn't know how to respond. Maybe I did look different. Maybe it was because, for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of what was to come. I wasn't sure what would happen next, but I knew one thing. I was ready to find out. "I need to speak with Mr. Rossi," I said, my voice steady, though my heart was pounding in my chest. Mrs. Chun raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised. "Mr. Rossi?" she repeated. "He's a busy man, Maya." "Are you sure?" I nodded. "Yes, I'm sure." And with that, I walked out of the kitchen, my steps firm and determined. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew I had made the right decision. It was time to step into the light, to stop being invisible. It was time to take control of my own life. I walked through the mansion with a purpose now, the halls no longer feeling like they were closing in around me. My decision had been made, and despite the uncertainty that still lingered, a sense of determination pushed me forward. I had walked this path for years, silently, invisibly, but today was different. Today, I was taking control. I wasn't sure exactly what I was going to say when I reached Dominic's office, but I knew that I had to speak to him. I had to make my own path, not one dictated by the role I had been playing for so long. As I approached the study, I hesitated for a moment, my heart racing. I had no idea how he would respond. He was, after all, the most powerful man in this mansion, a figure that everyone else respected or feared. And here I was, a maid, standing on the precipice of something I couldn't fully understand. But that was the very reason I had to do this. I couldn't live in the shadows anymore. I knocked softly on the door. "Come in," came Dominic's voice, steady and calm as always. I pushed the door open slowly, stepping inside. He was standing by the window, looking out at the city below. The light from the setting sun cast a warm glow across the room, but I could still feel the tension in the air, a silent weight that seemed to hang between us. "Maya," Dominic said without turning around. "I wasn't expecting you. I needed to talk to you," I said, my voice steady despite the whirlwind of thoughts in my mind. He finally turned to face me, his gaze locking onto mine. "About what?" he asked, his expression unreadable. I took a deep breath. "About what you said," I started, my voice softer now. "About the opportunities. About what I could be." He studied me for a moment, his sharp eyes analyzing every word, every shift in my demeanor. I could tell he wasn't rushing to fill the silence. He was waiting for me to speak. "I've been thinking," I continued, my hands slightly trembling at my sides. "About everything you said. About what I've been doing with my life." I paused, trying to steady myself. "I've spent so long just doing what I was told, staying invisible. But I don't want to do that anymore. I want to do more. I want to be more than just the maid, more than just the person who fades into the background." Dominic didn't speak immediately, and for a moment, I wondered if I had made a mistake, if I had said too much. But then he spoke, his voice low but firm. "You have potential, Maya. I see it. I've seen it since the first time you stepped into this mansion. But potential means nothing if you don't act on it. You have to take that first step." His words struck me like a lightning bolt. For the first time, I realized that he wasn't just offering me something. He was challenging me. Challenging me to make a choice, to step out of the role I had played for so long. I nodded slowly. I know, I said quietly. But I don't know what the next step is. I don't know where this path leads. Dominic walked towards me, his presence commanding the room in a way that made my heart race. The next step is yours to take. But you don't have to do it alone. I met his gaze, my mind swirling with confusion and possibility. What did he mean? Was he offering to guide me, to help me take that next step? Or was he just pushing me to find my own way? What if I fail? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. What if I make the wrong choice? Dominic paused for a moment, his eyes softening ever so slightly. Failure isn't the end, Maya, he said. It's part of the journey. The only real failure is never trying. His words felt like a lifeline, a reassurance that I wasn't as alone as I had always believed. So what do I do now? I asked, the question hanging in the air between us. What happens next? He stepped closer, his voice steady but with a quiet intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. Now you decide. You take the first step, and you stop letting fear control you. The rest will fall into place. I felt something shift inside me, a mix of fear and excitement. For the first time, I felt like I had a choice, like I wasn't just a bystander in my own life. I'm ready, I said, the words coming out stronger than I expected. I'll take that step. Dominic nodded, his eyes never leaving mine. Good, he said, his voice softening. Then go. Go and find what you're meant for. I stood there for a moment, the weight of his words settling over me. As I turned to leave the room, a sense of clarity washed over me. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing. I was ready to step into it. The mansion behind me no longer felt like a cage. It felt like the first step in a journey I had only just begun. I woke up the next morning with a sense of resolve I had never felt before. The sun filtered through the curtains, casting a warm, golden light across the room. It felt like the first real day of my life, a day where I was no longer living in the shadows, no longer invisible. I had made my choice, and though the path ahead was uncertain, I knew I was ready to walk it. As I dressed, I felt a strange mix of excitement and fear. I had always kept my emotions tightly guarded, never allowing myself to dream of anything more than what I had. But now, for the first time, I was allowing myself to think beyond the confines of my role as a maid. The thought terrified me, but it also thrilled me. I had no idea what would happen next, but I couldn't go back to the way things were. I had to take that step. The decision I had made wasn't just about leaving the mansion. It was about leaving behind everything I had known, everything I had accepted as my reality. I was stepping into the unknown, and for once, that felt like the right thing to do. I had to remind myself that this wasn't just about escaping. It was about growing, about discovering who I could really be. The idea that Dominic had seen something in me, something I had never seen myself, gave me the courage to push forward. I had always seen myself as just another face in the crowd, another person who blended into the background. But now, I was starting to believe that I was more than that. I had potential. I had a future beyond the walls of this mansion. And it was time to find out what that future looked like. When I arrived in the kitchen, the staff was already hard at work, preparing for another day. Mrs. Chun was in her usual spot, barking orders at everyone, her eyes scanning the room with sharp precision. I could feel her gaze on me as I walked past, but for the first time, I didn't shrink away. I stood tall, my steps purposeful. The mansion felt different now. The silence that had always weighed so heavily on me, the sense of being trapped in a world that wasn't mine, seemed to have lifted. Maybe it was just me, or maybe it was the fact that I was finally acknowledging the change I had been resisting for so long. Whatever it was, I felt lighter. As I walked through the halls, I caught glimpses of the life I had been a part of, the life I was now leaving behind. The polished floors, the expensive furniture, the portraits of the family that ruled this house. It was all so grand, but it felt hollow to me now. I had been a part of this world, but I had never belonged to it. I didn't want to belong to it anymore. I had a conversation with Dominic to finish, a choice to make. I had to tell him that I was ready. I had to speak the words that would change everything. I found him in his office, the door slightly ajar. He was sitting at his desk, going over some papers. When he looked up and saw me standing there, he didn't seem surprised. Maya, he said, his voice calm, but with a hint of something else. I've been expecting you. My heart pounded in my chest. This was it. The moment I had been preparing for. I stepped into the room, closing the door behind me. I've thought about what you said. I began, my voice steady. And I'm ready. Dominic's eyes narrowed slightly, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Ready for what? He asked, though I could tell he already knew the answer. Ready to take the first step, I said, my words coming out more confident than I felt. Ready to leave this behind and find out what I'm really capable of. He leaned back in his chair, studying me for a moment. And what do you think you're capable of, Maya? His voice was soft, but filled with meaning. I took a deep breath. I don't know yet, but I won't know unless I try. His gaze softened, and for a brief moment, I saw something in his eyes that I hadn't expected. Respect. Good, he said. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. I wasn't sure what to expect next. Would he offer me something? A way out? A position of power? Or would he simply dismiss me? Tell me that it was all just an empty promise? But he didn't do that. Instead, he stood up, walking around his desk to stand in front of me. Maya, he said, his voice low and steady. You've made the right choice. There's a lot ahead of you, but if you're willing to work for it, you'll get where you want to go. I felt a wave of emotion wash over me. For so long, I had felt like I was invisible, like I was meant to be forgotten. But in that moment, Dominic's words made me feel like I mattered, like I had value, like I could have a future that wasn't defined by my past. Thank you, I whispered, the words coming out before I even realized it. He nodded. Don't thank me yet, he said. This is just the beginning. But I'm confident you'll make it. And with that, he turned and walked back to his desk, leaving me standing there, my heart racing. I had made my decision. And in that moment, I realized something else. This wasn't just a choice about what I wanted to do next. It was a choice about who I was going to be from now on. I wasn't just the maid anymore. I wasn't just someone who did what she was told. I was someone who had the power to change her own life. I woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. The weight of the decision I had made settled on my shoulders, but it didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt like a challenge, something I was finally ready to face. After my conversation with Dominic, I realized that this was no longer about staying invisible. It wasn't about being the quiet maid who cleaned the floors and disappeared into the background. It was about becoming someone who took control of her life, who made her own choices, no matter how daunting they seemed. I stepped into the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. For the first time, I didn't see the woman who had always been too afraid to dream. I saw someone with potential, someone who had the ability to change her future. It wasn't going to be easy. I knew that. There would be challenges along the way, moments when I would want to give up, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that I was no longer content with simply existing. I wanted to live. I wanted to grow. I wanted to see what I could become. As I dressed for the day, I felt a sense of determination that I hadn't felt in years. I was ready to step out of the shadows and into the world I had been avoiding. I was ready to take that first step toward the future. When I arrived at the mansion, the usual bustle of the staff preparing for another day greeted me. But today, I didn't feel like I was just another part of the background. I was someone who had a choice. I walked through the halls with a newfound confidence, my head held high. Mrs. Chen looked at me as I passed, her usual stern expression softening for a moment. It was as if she could sense the change in me, though I wasn't sure if she understood it. I didn't care. I wasn't doing this for anyone else. I was doing it for me. As I made my way to the kitchen, I felt the weight of the mansion around me, the history, the legacy, the power that seemed to emanate from every corner. This place had always felt like a cage to me, a place where I was meant to remain unseen. But today, it felt different. I wasn't trapped here anymore. I had the power to leave whenever I chose. That thought sent a thrill through me, and I couldn't help but smile. I wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time, I felt like I had a say in it. I could feel the tension building in my chest. This was it. I was about to take the first real step toward something new. I wasn't sure if it was the right step, but I knew it was the one I had to take. I found myself standing outside Dominic's office. For a moment, I hesitated. What would I say? How would I explain everything I had been feeling? But then I reminded myself that this was my moment. I couldn't back out now. I knocked on the door, my heart pounding in my chest. Come in, Dominic's voice called from inside. I opened the door and stepped into the room, my legs feeling a little weak beneath me. Dominic was sitting at his desk, papers scattered in front of him. He looked up as I entered, his sharp eyes assessing me, as if he could tell exactly what was going through my mind. "Maya," he said, his voice steady but with an undertone of curiosity. "What can I do for you?" I stood there for a moment, collecting my thoughts. "I've been thinking about what you said," I began, my voice stronger than I had expected. "And I've made my decision." Dominic's eyes narrowed slightly, but he didn't speak. He simply waited for me to continue. "I'm ready," I said, the words coming out with more confidence than I had anticipated. "I'm ready to step into the world beyond this mansion. I don't want to live my life hiding anymore. I want to do more. I want to become something more than just a maid." Dominic studied me for a long moment, his gaze unreadable. The silence in the room was heavy, but I stood firm, not backing down. Finally, he spoke. "I knew you would come to this conclusion eventually," he said, his tone surprisingly warm. "You've always had the potential, Maya. It was never a matter of whether you could do it. It was a matter of whether you were ready to take the first step." I felt a sense of relief wash over me, but also something else, anticipation. "I'm ready," I repeated, more to myself than to him. Dominic stood up and walked toward me, his presence filling the room. "Then it's time to start," he said, his voice low and serious. "You've made the right choice. But remember, the road ahead won't be easy. There will be obstacles, doubts, moments where you want to give up. But if you stay focused, if you stay true to yourself, you'll make it." His words resonated deeply within me. I knew that this was just the beginning, that the path I had chosen would be challenging. But for the first time, I felt like I could face it. I wasn't alone anymore. I had made the decision, and I was ready to follow through. As I left his office, I felt like I was walking into a new chapter of my life. The mansion behind me seemed to fade into the distance, no longer the oppressive force it once was. I was free now, free to become whoever I wanted to be. And as I stepped out into the world, I knew that the journey ahead would be difficult, but I was ready. I had taken the first step, and that was all I needed. I walked through the city streets with a sense of freedom that I had never known before. The world around me seemed brighter, more vibrant. It was as if I had been walking in a fog for years, and now the fog had lifted, revealing a world full of possibilities. I had made my decision, and with that decision came a weightless sense of liberation. There was no turning back now. The mansion, the life I had known, all of it felt distant, like a chapter one had closed long ago. I was moving forward, not sure where this path would take me, but knowing that I was finally in control. My hands trembled slightly as I adjusted the bag on my shoulder. I wasn't used to this. I wasn't used to making decisions for myself, to not being bound by rules and expectations. But I was getting used to it. Slowly, I had been given the chance to step outside the life I had been trapped in, to take a leap into the unknown. And now, for the first time, I could see a future that was mine to create. As I walked, I thought about Dominic. His words still echoed in my mind. "You've made the right choice. But remember, the road ahead won't be easy." I had been prepared for that. Change wasn't supposed to be easy. It wasn't supposed to be comfortable. But that didn't mean it wasn't worth it. I had always stayed within my comfort zone, hidden behind the walls of the mansion, doing the work and fading into the background. But now, I was standing in the open, with no walls around me, no barriers keeping me from stepping forward. It felt terrifying and exhilarating. I had no idea where I was going, but I knew that wherever it was better than staying where I had been. I stopped at a crosswalk, waiting for the light to change. As I stood there, I couldn't help but reflect on how much I had changed in such a short time. It was as if I had shed an old skin, one that had held me captive for so long. And now, I was learning to live without it. I crossed the street and found myself in front of a small cafe. I had passed it countless times, but today it felt different. It felt like a place where I could breathe, a place where I could take a moment to think without the pressure of the mansion hanging over me. I stepped inside and ordered a coffee, settling into a quiet corner with my thoughts. As I sat there, I realized how much I had been running from my own desires. For so long, I had been focused on survival, on getting through each day without drawing attention. But now, I had the chance to pursue something more, something I had always been too afraid to reach for. I sipped my coffee, savoring the warmth and the calm. This was my moment. My first real moment of peace in a long time. The weight of my decision still lingered, but now it felt like a burden I was willing to carry. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew I was ready for whatever came next. I had stepped out of the shadows, and for the first time, I could see the world for what it was, full of opportunities, full of challenges, and full of potential. As I left the cafe, I felt a sense of excitement building within me. This was just the beginning. I had made the decision to change my life, and now it was time to see where it would take me. The road ahead would be difficult, no doubt, but for the first time, I felt ready to face whatever came my way. I had made my choice, and I was no longer afraid of what it meant. I was walking forward, not looking back. And as I stepped into the future, I knew one thing for sure. I was no longer invisible. I stood at the threshold of the next chapter of my life, and for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid. It had been weeks since I had made the choice to leave the mansion behind, to step into the world that awaited me outside. Every day since that moment had felt like a small victory. Each step I took pushing me further from the life I had always known. I had been cautious at first, unsure of what exactly I was meant to do, but the more time passed, the more I realized that this new freedom, this new life, was exactly what I needed. The city had never felt so alive. Every street corner, every building, every face I passed seemed like a reminder that there was so much more out there for me. I could breathe now. I could dream. I had taken the leap, and though the uncertainty still lingered, it was no longer something that held me back. It was something that drove me forward. I found myself taking small jobs here and there, nothing glamorous, but enough to get by. I was still figuring things out, still learning how to exist in a world where I wasn't defined by my past. But with each new day, I felt more confident, more sure of who I was becoming. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was living. But even as I moved forward, there were moments when my mind wandered back to the mansion, to Dominic. I had left that life behind, but the impact of his words, of his belief in me, still lingered. He had given me the courage to step outside of myself, to see that I was capable of so much more than I had ever believed. I still didn't fully understand why he had taken an interest in me, why he had seen something in me when I had never seen it myself. But I had come to terms with it. It didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that he had shown me a different way, a way out of the shadows I had lived in for so long. As the weeks passed, I slowly began to carve out a space for myself in the world. I found a small apartment, one that wasn't fancy but felt like a sanctuary. It was mine, and that was all that mattered. I decorated it with simple things, books, a few plants, a worn-out couch, and in it, I felt a sense of peace that I had never known before. It was my own space, a place where I could be myself without anyone telling me who I should be. One evening, as I was sitting on the couch, a knock at the door startled me. I wasn't expecting anyone. I stood up, my heart racing for no reason I could put into words, and walked to the door. When I opened it, I was surprised to see Dominic standing there, his posture as commanding as ever. My heart skipped a beat. "Maya," he said, his voice calm, but carrying the weight of something unspoken. "Can I come in?" I hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to say or do. But then, I stepped aside and opened the door wider, motioning for him to enter. As he walked in, I couldn't help but feel a wave of emotions flood over me. Surprise, curiosity, maybe even a little nervousness. He looked around the small apartment with a thoughtful expression. "It's not much," I said, my voice slightly unsure. "But it's mine." He nodded, his gaze meeting mine. "I can see that," he said. "And that's exactly what matters." We stood there for a moment, the silence between us comfortable but charged with an energy I couldn't quite place. Finally, he spoke again. "I've been keeping an eye on you, Maya," he said, his tone gentle but steady. "And I can't say I'm surprised by what you've done." I frowned slightly, not sure where this conversation was going. "What do you mean?" I asked. He looked at me with a slight smile, as if he were holding back something more. "I knew you had it in you," he said. "It was just a matter of time before you saw it yourself." I didn't know what to say to that. Part of me wanted to thank him for everything he had done, for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself. But another part of me wanted to ask why. Why had he done all of this for me? "I'm not here to offer you anything else, Maya," he said, as if reading my thoughts. "You've already taken the most important step. Now, it's up to you to build the life you want." His words, simple and direct, resonated deeply within me. This was my life now. I was the one in control. He had given me the opportunity, but it was up to me to seize it. I nodded slowly, feeling a wave of gratitude for the first time in a long while. "Thank you," I said quietly. He gave me a small nod. You've earned it, he said. And then, after a moment of silence, he turned to leave. As he reached the door, he paused, turning back to look at me. You're doing great, Maya, he said, his voice softer now. Don't forget that. And with that, he left, leaving me standing in the quiet of my apartment, a small smile on my face. It was the first time I truly understood what he had meant. I had taken that first step. Now, I was building my own path, and I was doing it on my own terms. The world was mine to shape, and I was finally ready to shape it.